Feeding strategies for digested cows have received tremendous attention over the last 25 years, and this has ranged from prevention of hypocalcemia to protein nutrition, and frankly, carbohydrate nutrition continues to receive a tremendous amount of attention. If you think about the last 10 years, there's been big changes in how we fed cows during the pre-calving period, going more toward lower energy, lower starch, pre-calving diets, Goldilocks type diets as they're commonly referred to, and also discussion in the post-calving period relative to transitioning cows onto a lower starch or a higher starch diet post-calving. And that may actually depend some on the fiber fraction of the diet and aspects related to fiber digestibility. And that's been an interesting area to work in and one that continues to get lots of attention with our nutritionists and our farms. Carbohydrates comprise the majority of the diet, both pre and post-calving for dairy cattle. Of course, they're the most important source of energy in those diets, just like they are in other parts of the lactation cycle. Our group has focused over time some on starch levels, both prepartum and postpartum, and we generally believe that at least post-calving we can feed higher starch diets as long as we have sufficient digestible and even indigestible fiber in those post-calving diets, as well as if we set them up beforehand, before calving, such that jump in starch levels, for example, would be no more than 8 to 10 percentage units going between pre-calving and post-calving. More recently, we've been thinking about the role of fiber in fiber pools more specifically, and that's really followed a lot of the interest in looking at those pools and other stages of lactation. We need to provide, we need to emphasize digestible fiber, but then we also need to ensure we have enough UNDF or undigested NDF to make sure we have good rumen adaptation, good rumen function as these cows come on to feed post-calving. It's been really interesting to dig into the topic of fiber digestibility and transition diets, and especially related to the research that's been done. And it's interesting because there actually hasn't been as much research in this area as we might think. Recently, I was able to look at the literature in which researchers had replaced forage fiber or forage sources with non-forage or byproduct type fiber sources during the prepartum period. And it was interesting to see in that literature that although oftentimes they can demonstrate higher dry matter intakes before calving, maybe better metabolic status, that usually those changes actually didn't often translate into improved post-calving performance, either in terms of milk yield or intake or metabolic status, things like that. On the other hand, we've had a couple different studies that specifically looked at the effect of improving forage fiber digestibility more specifically. Now, these have been in studies in which conventional corn silage has been replaced with brown midrib corn silage, both during the pre-calving and post-calving periods. Interestingly, in those studies, not only was there improved pre-calving indices relative to intake and metabolism, but in that case, those differences translated into increased intake, increased milk production, and better metabolic status post-calving. And so it suggests to me that there's a role specifically for improving fiber digestibility and forage fiber digestibility to translate into better outcomes in this transition cow. Now, we still have a ways to go, though, in terms of learning about, again, how our various NDF pools really come into play and really developing specific feeding recommendations. But we've got some ideas and some studies that are giving us a base to do that, and we look forward to doing more work here in the future on that topic. In the past several years, our forage laboratories have really expanded their analytical capabilities to look at fiber digestibility, and they've moved beyond only looking at fiber digestibility or NDF digestibility at, say, 24 or 30 hours, but then have also started looking at the undigested NDF fractions going out as far as 240 hours. Now, of course, that fiber doesn't stay in the rumen for that amount of time, nor probably in the cow for that amount of time. But what it tells us is something intrinsic about the fiber within that forage fraction. It truly gets at what is actually never going to be available to the cow. And the way we apply these things is, we think that that fiber digestibility at say 30 hours or 24 hours is a great indice anyway of the energy value of that feed in terms of the quickness by which that fiber is going to become available in the rumen, the energy it's going to provide up front. On the other hand, though, the UNDF value at 240 hours gives us a sense, we think, for intake potential in the cow. And of course, when you think about fiber digestibility, you've got to think about not only about the amount of energy that's going to be provided for the rumen microbes, but you've also got to think about what effect does that have at the end of the day on physical fill and the capacity of that cow for intake. So in our nutritional approaches and modeling approaches, we use both of those types of information because we think both are valuable. And again, they tell us a bit different things, perhaps, about how those forages really do perform. And I think it really does. We've been doing, in the last several years, we've gotten back to doing corn silage hybrid trials in New York under the Pro Dairy program. Joe Lawrence is a specialist in our program and leads those. And it has been interesting to incorporate the UNDF 240 information along with the 30-hour NDF digestibility because it does seem to tell us additional information about how those forages may really perform. And we think that it does a better job of helping us account, again, for year to year, whether it's year-to-year differences, farm-to-farm differences, what have you, relative to how the NDF pools and that feed are actually going to perform and how the cows are going to do as a result.